Viserys was an idiot, but every once in a while he said something that was pretty genius. In a Game of Thrones, he assesses which houses would support him. Tyrell, Redwine, Derry, Greyjoy, they have no more love for the usurper than I do. The Dornish men burn to avenge Elia and her children, and the small folk will be with us. They cry out for their king. They do, don't they? Long before the War of the Five Kings, he's able to correctly identify some of the most scheming power players. But this video is about the Riverlands, so let's talk about Derry and the small folk. Let's go back to the beginning of the war. Three men come to Eddard talking about the destruction of Mummer's Ford, Sherrare, and Wendish Town. Those three men are Mark Piper, Carl Vance, and Raymond Derry. So we know the Pipers are the lords of Pink Maiden. We don't know exactly where the Vances live, but somewhere near Acorn Hall. And the Derrys are somewhat south of the Trident near the King's Road. So this is where those lands are on the map. If you notice, there's something odd about Derry. Now we can deduce that Mummer's Ford is Piper land, Sherrare is Vance land, and Wendish Town is Derry land. Mummer's Ford is at the front of the war near the Golden Tooth. It's also upriver from Sherrare. Also, Vance speaks about the status of Sherrare, while Derry speaks about the status of Wendish Town. So the locations only make sense if Sherrare and Mummer's Ford are over in Vance and Piper land, while Wendish Town is over in Derry land. Now let's go over what these men say very carefully, because after all, these events led to the war. Sir Raymond Derry is the first to speak. He says, "Oh, they were brigands beyond a doubt. Lannister brigands." Carl Vance then continues. He says, "This is all that remains of the holdfast of Sherrare, Lord Eddard. The rest are dead, along with the people of Wendish Town and the Mummer's Ford." So despite the fact that no one from Wendish Town is alive, Sir Raymond Derry is somehow sure it's Lannisters. Eddard then has the peasants come forward. "Joss, tell the Hand what happened at Sherrare." So Sir Raymond Derry is on a first-name basis with Carl Vance's peasants? And so Joss explains, "I kept an alehouse, my lord, in Sherrare. They came and drank their fill and spilled the rest before they fired my roof. They burnt us out, come riding in the dark up from the south and fired the fields and the houses alike." So which was it? Did they start in the alehouse, or did they come riding in from the south, burning everything? "They rode down my prentice boy. They killed my mother." At Wendish Town, the people sought shelter in their holdfast, but the walls were timbered. The raiders piled straw against the wood and burnt them all alive. When the Wendish folk opened their gates to flee the fire, they shot them down with arrows as they came running out, even women with suckling babes. Wow, Sir Raymond, that's a lot of details considering no one survived Wendish Town to tell that story. But also, how is everyone burned alive only to have people run out and shot with arrows? "They would have done the same for us, but Sherrare holdfasts made of stone. The big one said there was riper fruit upriver, and they made for the Mummer's Ford." So the big one said there was riper fruit upriver. That's some super hearing you got there, Joss, considering you were inside a stone holdfast. So this is the story so far. The Lannister forces are at the Golden Tooth, so they would have to cross the Red Fork and spend maybe a week to get all the way to Wendish Town to burn that village out, to then spend a week going all the way back to Sherrare, but coming in from the south, before heading south to the Mummer's Ford, and then heading back over to the Golden Tooth. Eddard then asks how many there were. One person says 50, one says 100, and another says hundreds and hundreds. Now, Eddard asks if they flew any banners or had any sigils, and Joss the Brewer says that they were led by a man who was big as an ox. And so based on the description of being really big made by one witness, Eddard sentences the Mountain to death. The Mountain may be a fuckface, but Sir Raymond Derry and Joss the Brewer sound like they're full of shit. Therefore, I have to say the Mountain is innocent of these crimes. But what about Harwin's story? Yeah, what about Harwin's story? In A Storm of Swords, Harwin tries to explain all of this madness. He says Lord Tywin sent his mountain across the Red Fork with fire and sword, hoping to draw out Eddard. He planned for Eddard to come west himself to deal with the mountain. If he had, he would have been killed or taken prisoner and traded for the imp. So Harwin is reading Tywin's diary now? I'm not sure how he's coming upon this information. But this supposed plan doesn't make any sense. It relies on Robert to be out hunting so that Eddard will be handling the kingdom's business alone. But Robert only goes out hunting after Eddard gets injured. Had Tywin heard about Robert's hunting trip, he would have heard about Eddard's injury and known that Eddard couldn't deliver justice himself. If Tywin were ignorant of Eddard's injury, he would also be ignorant of Robert's hunting trip, and therefore Eddard wouldn't be delivering the justice. In fact, Pycelle specifically says that this matter is serious enough that it would be deferred to the king. But if Tywin and the Mountain didn't attack Wendish Town, Sharer, and the Mummer's Ford, who did? Well, in A Clash of Kings, Cleos Frey gives a fairly honest assessment of the war. He says that in addition to Lannister cruelty, the Riverlords are burning their own lands. And over in our story, we meet small folk who are hiding in ruins, and in cellars, and in trees, and behind reeds. We have no real proof that the people of Mummer's Ford, Sharer, and Wendish Town are actually dead. They may just be hiding. So what is Darry up to? Why this Mummer's farce over the Mummer's Ford? Well, Sir Raymond Darry recommends to Eddard that they strike back, steel for steel. Mark Piper agrees and claims Edmure Tully agrees as well. Eddard, though, says he specifically doesn't want vengeance, he wants justice, and he wants to restore the king's peace, so he purposely sends men that have no beef with the Lannisters. He tells Beric Dondarrion, Thoros of Myr, Gladden Wild, and Lothar Mallory to each assemble 20 men. Along with 20 Stark men, they are to bring justice to the Mountain at his keep. So in summary, our Justice League should be around 100 guys heading to Gregor's keep. Piper, Vance, and Darry are to do nothing. But unsurprisingly, Piper, Vance, and Darry are very bad at following directions. Piper and Vance go on a revenge spree in the Westerlands anyway, and Sir Raymond Darry decides to tag along with Dondarrion's crew. Now the crew is described as having 120 men, so one would think the extra 20 would be from Darry. Except Thoros of Myr is a foreigner. He doesn't have a house, so I'm not sure where he's getting men from. His men are spoken of collectively with Darry, so it might be that Darry spotted him 20 men. Whatever the case, Piper, Vance, and Darry came to King's Landing with suspicious stories wanting to attack the Lannisters. And despite not having Eddard's leave to do so, they went off to attack the Lannisters anyway. So Darry wants to start a war? Why would he want to do that? Well, it turns out Viserys is 100% correct about Darry. Darry is the biggest Targaryen supporter in the world. When Tyrion and Jaime stayed at Castle Darry, Tyrion noted some dark stones where tapestries had once hung. Tyrion and Jaime found the tapestries in the basement. They were of every Targaryen king. Keep in mind, Sir Raymond Darry lost 3 brothers at the Trident, and songs are written about how the Darrys fight suicidally to the last man. So it seems Sir Raymond Darry is exactly the type of person that would try to start a war between the Starks and the Lannisters, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. Now, Darry and most of Dondarrion's crew are slaughtered at the Battle of the Mummer's Ford, but the hawkish trio of Piper, Vance, and Darry are preserved through Darry's son. When Robb meets with his war council, Piper and Vance bring along the young Lord Darry, a boy no older than Bran. And the kid wants war just as bad as his dad did. The war council is interesting, though, as Mark Piper recommends that Robb join forces with Renly. This shows that if Darry has plans for Targaryen restoration, Mark Piper was not part of them. He's just a hothead that wants war with the Lannisters. The jury is out on Carl Vance, though, as he's completely silent during these deliberations. Now, the young Lord Darry is supposedly killed by the Mountain later. This ends House Darry in the male line. But the story is a bit weird. The Blackfish reports, the boy would have made a fine ransom, but what does gold mean to a frothing dog like Gregor Clegane? Actually, we know exactly what gold means to Gregor Clegane. Was there gold hidden in the village? Silver? Gems? Where was Lord Beric Dondarrion? How many men were with him? By the 3rd day, Arya could have asked the questions herself. It's as if Blackfish went to the same school that Sir Raymond Darry went to for blaming everything on the Mountain. Blackfish, who did you squire for? Oh, Lord Darry? Oh, you did go to the same school that Sir Raymond Darry did. Was young Lord Darry actually killed? And if so, by whom? Certainly not the Mountain. And if he's alive, where is he? Interestingly, Marillion, a singer from the Riverlands, has a song about a missing boy. Oh, have you seen my boy, good sir? His hair is chestnut brown. He promised he'd come back to me. Our home's in Wendish Town. Except Marillion probably had a good voice. Now, of all the houses, Marillion sings about a Darry boy, and of all the villages in Darry, he sings about Wendish Town. Now, one would think that the apparent death of the Darrys would end their scheming, but it continues with the Brotherhood Without Banners, and we'll talk about them in Part 2.